Wow, that's a whole new look, isn't it? Yeah, I moved the desk around so I've got this wall against me, behind me, for the auditions. Um, so unless we assume, which I don't, some people do, and I haven't argued with them, um, mostly because they seem like very decent people. Most of the people I know are very decent people. I encounter decent people all the time. So my study would be what creates a Hamas, which means what creates a Pontiac's rebellion, what creates a Nat Turner rebellion, what creates a Little Bighorn, and who are we that sit there and say, when it happens, why did that happen? Oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is terrible, and there's they're terrible, terrible people that did this. They're terrorists, terrible, terrible terrorists. And recently on the news, there's been this this pardon for the participants of the 6th of January, and the sentences were varied. I heard about one which was for 20 years and another one was for 18 years, and I think that they were for the leaders of the militias who were said to have plotted this. And just right off the bat, I have to say that if that was planned and plotted, they're a long, long way off being successful. The National Guard wasn't even called in. You know what I mean? So I tend to think that that's dubious. But anyway, this is a good legal system with smart people running it, and they came to those conclusions, and they created those sentences. My thing is that ever since the MAGA thing began, or the Tea Party, or whatever it was, most of myself included, people were running around going, what is this with these people? What's going on with these people? So I wonder if somebody was living, in Montana in 1860 something, and literally was unaware that the Oglala and the Cheyenne or whoever was around in those days was being marginalized and treated really, really badly. Apparently the Canadians didn't have a clue. And what is that does that? So do we just think of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and the militias and MAGA? Do we just think that they're just fundamentally wrong, and so we'll put them in prison? Because I would think that if you wanted to stop a local version of Hamas, you need to be thinking, well, we got to put them in jail forever, and then you do become anyway. That's the premise. That's my thought, or my issue for several weeks, really. Anyway, so I began this with a response to somebody's very interesting post on Substack, which is about basically how, contrary to America's belief in itself as being the new world savior, it's actually quite a different story. If you banish certain kinds of history, then you can stick with that story. But if you look at history, you have to draw certain conclusions. Anyway, the mess that is Messianism. A story needed inventing for all the world's colonizers, New Jerusalems all over. It is one of Christianity's worst legacies, along with inquisitions which were at least largely in-house or sectarian, but that it allowed for discovery doctrines and manifest destinies as if they were outtakes from the Sermon on the Mount is so disgusting it is probably beyond acknowledging. Civilians capable of an admission like that simply were not capable of committing those particular crimes, apparently. In this way, the West is exceptional. Today I tipped my toe into the Sunday shows, MSNBC less relentless than the CNN drear, but my lord, Jen Psaki, it's a very intelligent face, an alert demeanor. She was covering the great pardoning. My first blush is that it is an absurd constitutional endowing pardoning to begin with. It needs repealing, rather like the Electoral College. It would be good to reflect that without one of these two elitist founderings, the Trump phenomenon wouldn't exist. He would not have taken office in 2016. On the specifics, she was covering a Hispanic ex-Proud Boy leader. He was about to do a year in prison before Trump's pardon. He took back his admissions of guilt while on trial, and I thought, would a year in jail have changed him? Is this another example of prison being nothing to do with rehabilitation? They should pay for what they did. Then another Capitol policeman was trotted out to tell the story we have heard over and over and over and over again, so I went back to the football. Now, I have nothing to do with the Proud Boys. I have no truck with them, with militias in general. I'm not the militia type. I don't know one person in those communities, and if I did, if he was a friend, I'd need to sit down and ask what the grievance is. Because the media has not done that. They've assumed certain things, but they've not asked specifically. I would, for myself, need to understand. Instead, I have been encouraged, coerced into believing that they are all, 1,500 of them, murderous thugs, and by inference, the 72 million Trump voters are too. You know, sexist, misogynist, racist, fascist, every ist in the book, except elitist. If the militias present on January the 6th were the threat, Jen and the Blues insist they are no threat at all. Hamas, they ain't. And speaking of that, will the Democrats encourage the arrest of IDF members for war crimes? Or will they even, this would be strange, object when the next Israeli premier decides to exonerate? Oh, that's right. They don't have that insanity in the Israeli constitution. Apparently, the Hispanic Proud Boy Jen was covering, it wasn't Enrique Tarrio. This guy was Cuban and was convinced Biden was a communist. Hardly, except big part of communism was believing some citizens were inherently anti the communist government of the Soviet Union or the Chinese or Cuban state. And these people needed changing by all kinds of methods, usually through intimidation, murder, and gulags, or just liquidation. Now, do establishment Democrats believe the Trump voter is irredeemable? They certainly give me that impression. Inferior, incapable of understanding the great goodnesses of Joe and Kamala, imagining the slippery slope that Democrats do. Am I not looking down the black diamond hill of a Stalin here? I'm just using their language, their concept. I don't put much stock in thin ends or slippery slopes, but were one trying to convince fellow citizens of right and wrong, doesn't condemning 40% of those citizens of inherent wrongness fail? I'm bewildered by charges of communism of any living Democrat, millionaire lovers that they are. If we believe a civil war is due, I think we are getting close to gulagism. These exonerees are not repenting. They're energized and more angry than ever, more deeply convicted. This is horrible, horrible. But it happens. See Israel. They will need to go to prison forever This is the slippery slope I worry about. This is how Hamas started.